Alrighty, welcome to video number 2 on multiplying and dividing rational numbers. And the first thing I want to talk to you about, you don't need your notes on this one, just watch and listen. And some of you probably already understand it, but what does it mean to actually divide a fraction by a fraction? Alright, well, let's say we have this one right here. We have this 2/3 divided by 1/6. So what does that mean? Well, it means I have this whole piece. Here's one whole blue bar piece. But I don't want the whole thing, I only want 2/3 of it. So I have to divide it into the thirds. And so when I divide it into thirds, I have 1/3 here, 1/3 here, and 1/3 here. Those 3/3 make a whole. But I don't want all of them, I only want 2 of them. I only want 2/3. I don't want all of this. And I'm going to take that small piece, those 2/3 of the whole number, and I'm going to divide it by 1/6 of this whole thing. So if I take that whole thing again, and I divide it into 1/6, I would have a 1/6 here, a 1/6 here, a 1/6 here, and here, and here, and here. And I want to know how many of these 1/6s fit into the 2/3. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of them are the exact same size as 2/3, so that means 2/3 divided by 1/6 is equal to 4, because 4 of those will fit in. That's what it means. It's just dividing, but people have a hard time visualizing that conceptually in their brain of taking a fraction of something and dividing it by another fraction of that something. All right? Moving right along, let's just get into what we really need to. Grab your insert now, and in your insert, you will have this little thing on multiplicative inverse. We also call that the reciprocal. And the only notes they had on that was a real small thing, the study tip, which was at the top of the first page of the lesson in the book, and it said that A over B, the reciprocal of that is B over A. Now recognize, if I take that A over B and I multiply it by that B over A, what am I going to get? That's right, the two B's simplify out, the two A's simplify out. I get 1 over 1. My answer is 1. So it's really important to understand and know this. You might want to write this in that little space. And you might want to write this right here, that the reciprocal of A over B is B over A. And then write these words. When you multiply any number, it can be a fraction, it can be a decimal, it can be anything. Any number by its inverse, that's also the reciprocal. The product is 1. So when I multiply them, any number by its reciprocal, I will always get an answer of 1. Always. So now, to identify what the reciprocal is just the flip. It is just the flip of the number. Okay? So taking 2/3 and flipping it, the reciprocal is 3/2. I wouldn't put an equal sign there because 2/3 is not equal to 3/2. Okay? So I just flipped the fraction. And so in B, some people get confused because there's a negative. A lot of people want to say it's the opposite. It's not the opposite. We think of opposite as signs, positive and negative. This is still going to be negative. And what we're doing is flipping the fraction. So it's a negative 3/2. All right? And then on the last one, anytime you have a mixed or a whole number, you must make them improper before you can find the reciprocal. So a negative 4 2/3 is a negative 14/3. And the reciprocal of that would be a negative 3/14. So a negative 3/14 is the reciprocal of a negative 4/3. And this is really important because, as we discussed with the 4 steps in the previous video, for multiplying and dividing, step number 2 says we have to multiply by the reciprocal. So here we go through those steps again, saying them in our head to remind ourselves. 3/4 divided by 2/3. So do we need to make anything improper? Nope. Are we dividing? Yes, we are. So we need to change that 3/4 divided by to 3/4 multiplied by. The reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2. Can we simplify anywhere? A lot of people like to simplify first. Nope. So we just multiply across the numerators. 3 times 3 is 9. Multiply across the denominators. 4 times 2 is 8. And now we're going to simplify and get 1 1/8. Pretty straightforward. Following those procedures, going those steps in our head, you will get to the point where you're going to be doing it just like that. Finding 8 divided by a negative 2 1/5, we need to take 8 and make it an improper fraction. So we have 8 over 1 divided by a negative 2 1/5. And the reciprocal would be a negative 11/5. We are dividing, so we're going to take 8 over 1 and we're going to multiply that by the reciprocal, which would be a negative 5/11. Again, can we simplify anywhere? I don't see it. Multiplying across the numerator, negative 40. Multiplying across the denominator, over 11. And my final answer, negative 3 7/11. All right? Again, straightforward. Following what we know, using your notes if you have to, each and every single time until you have it in your head. 3 1/4 divided by a negative 1 1/8. Got to make improper. So that would be 13/4 divided by a negative 9/8. And we are dividing, so 13/4 times, this would be a negative 8/9. And now we ask ourselves, do we like to multiply first or simplify first? And I'm a simplifier, so I would take 4 into 4 once and 4 into 8 2 times. And now when I multiply, I get a negative 26/9. And when I simplify once again, I get a negative 2 8/9. Let's try doing some division with decimals as our rational numbers. And you have to remember that you cannot divide with a decimal. So we have to first change that divisor to a whole number. We have to make it a whole number. To do that, you move that decimal the number of places needed to make it a whole number. But you better count them, because you have to then move it the same number of places in the dividend. And of course, there might be times that you have to add some zeros. We like to call that annexing zeros to hold place value. All right, so let's do our problem. We have 8 976 thousandths divided by 2 2 2/10. So I make my little house. I put in my dividend, 8 976 thousandths divided by 2.2. Now I look at my divisor. My divisor, 2.2, it's not a whole number. I've got to move that decimal. I have to make a whole number 22. I moved it one place, so I come over here to my dividend and I move it one place. Now if you're like me, you like to make things simple, I put it right up into the answer right away so I don't forget, because I'm a forgetful person. Once I move it in the dividend, I move it into the answer. And now I do my division. 22 does go into 89 4 times, giving me 88, which is 1 left over. 22 does not go into 17, so I have to put a 0 to hold that place value. And 22 goes into 176 8 times. So 8 976 thousandths divided by 2 2/10 is equal to 4 8, oops, there's my 0, 8/100ths. 4 8/100ths. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, last thing you have to do is you might have to multiply more than 2 rational numbers at a time. And some people would say, hey, I'm going to multiply these 2, get an answer here, and then I'm going to multiply those 2 and get an answer there. You can certainly do it that way if you want. I like to do them all at the same time. Again, it does not matter what method you like to do. We just need to follow those 4 steps as we do it. First thing is improper, so we get 10/3 times a negative 18/5 times a negative 5/1. And now we're going to go and simplify in a few places. 3 does go into 3 once, and it goes into 18 6 times. And 5 doesn't go into negative 5 1 time. And so now 10 times a negative 6 is negative 60 times a negative 1 is positive 60. And 1 times 1 times 1 is going to give me 1. So my final answer is 60. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of this video. We just got a quick write to do real fast. Write down the problem. 3 1/4 divided by a negative 1 1/8. And as you're writing that down, please do not forget, if you have any questions about multiplying and dividing rational numbers, please bring them to class. It not only helps you, it helps other people who are afraid to ask questions. I hope if there's one thing I can do, it's get you to be unafraid to ask questions. Remember, being confident is a principle of intelligence, and so you have to be confident enough to ask questions in class. Don't forget to start working on your assignment as soon as you're done. 45 quality minutes. Be accountable. Be accountable for what you are asked to do, using some aggressiveness and urgency and using your time effectively. As always, you rock, and it is an honor, a pleasure, each and every single time I get to share math with you.